A to Z, you're in a car accident. What do you do? How do you handle it? What's the process of the case like? If you have any question at all, there's a good chance there's an answer in this video. I'm gonna put timestamps in the description because this video is probably gonna be longer than you want it to be, but I'm going to put timestamps where all the questions and types of things that happen in cases are outlined. So maybe you see something in that timestamp and you go, oh, that's the one I want to know about. And then you could just go to that part of the video. Wow, amazing. Here we go. All right, so number one, boom, you get into a car accident. I'm telling you, you need to call the police. If the police say that they can't come because there's no injuries, I'm telling you, you need to encourage them to please come to the scene, because getting a police report is going to be huge to determining the other person is at fault. People lie out here. They may take blame at the scene, but then you go to file the claim later and they lie to their insurance company. If you can't get a police report, or if you can, still try to get photos, try to get insurance cards, try to get a video, maybe put it in your pocket to get the other person admitting that they're at fault. Put them on an audio recording, you know, do whatever you can at the scene to make sure the other person's at fault for it. Number two, which could simultaneously be number one as well, not to worry if you don't get all that information. You know, you still have abilities to make the case work. But number two is you need to get medical treatment. So if you're really hurt, or you're not sure if you're really hurt, you can get an ambulance to the hospital, or you could have a friend or yourself drive you to the hospital. It's very important in a car accident case that you get your injuries documented on record as soon as possible. So when the insurance company says, okay, you went to the doctor because you were hurt in a car accident, you have the documentation right there that says, yes, you did. Now, number three, if your vehicle's still drivable, great, you could drive it. If your vehicle's not drivable, it's likely going to get towed to either a storage lot, or if you're luck out, maybe you could get them to tow it to your house. This is going to be really important for later on, because if you run into an issue with getting the insurance company to accept responsibility as soon as possible, or you don't have insurance to get the ball rolling, your car could be in the tow lot for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then you run into this issue where the storage fees are adding up. And even if later on you could get the insurance company on the other side to accept responsibility, they may say that they're not going to pay for all those storage fees because the law says you have to mitigate your damages. Hopefully that doesn't happen. The other guy accepts responsibility as soon as possible, or you have insurance to get the ball rolling, and there's no storage fees adding up, and you can get your property damage resolved right away. If it went to the tow lot, it's likely totaled, which means that the insurance company, by law, is responsible for giving you the value of your car. If you have a loan on your car, they're not responsible for paying off your loan. They are responsible for paying the value of your car. So if your loan's worth more than the value of your car, they're going to give the money to your loan company, say $10,000, but maybe you owe $12,000. There's $2,000 left over. Either your gap insurance is going to pick up for that, or it's going to be still there owed on the car. If you're still driving your car, it's likely repairable. And as soon as you get the other driver to accept responsibility, or even before then, you can get an estimate to see how much it's going to cost to fix your car. These days, insurance companies like to give a preliminary estimate, which means that they're probably going to tell you to send photos over there. They're going to say, here's $2,000 to fix your car. You're going to be like, there's no way, it's going to cost more money to fix my car. But when you bring it into a body shop, the body shop could send something called a supplement to the insurance company to get more money to fix your car, and then they'll repair it the rest of the way. As long as everything's reasonable, most of the time you don't run into too many issues with the property claim. All right, so that's how the property would go. Keep in mind, with the rental vehicle, the at-fault driver's insurance is responsible for giving you a rental vehicle from the date of the accident up until the vehicle is either considered a total loss, meaning the insurance company has documented on their end that your vehicle's a total loss. So if the accident happened May 1st and the insurance calls you May 20th and says your vehicle's a total loss, they owe you 20 days of either a cost of a rental, or maybe they provided a rental to you up until it's a total loss. If your car is still drivable, they will provide a rental for you, or the cost of a rental while your car is getting repaired. Number 4, which some of these things are all simultaneously happening, but look, you need to get the person who caused the accident, you need to get their insurance company to accept responsibility for your accident. Hopefully, if you followed good with number 1, you've got a lot of evidence on your side. Something I didn't mention is a potential witness statement. Hopefully you got enough evidence on your side to have the insurance company accept responsibility for the accident. Some other investigative work that I do is sometimes I'll request the body worn camera from the police officer to see if I could listen in and hear any type of audio on the other side that puts them at fault for the accident, or I could see some car placement that is there in the video camera from the officer that may reveal more evidence that the other driver's at fault. Sometimes you could call some of the places of businesses in the area of the accident afterwards and see if they have any type of video camera footage from the accident. You're going to want to do this as soon as possible, because depending on the company, that video may be overwritten in 48 hours and 30 days or 1 week, whatever they have it set for. Another thing I like to do is I like to see if the person who caused the accident or potentially caused the accident has any type of criminal record. You know, some things that I could find out about the individual. I'll check out their social media. I'll try to get any dirt that I can on them to discredit them in a way, especially if we're going to have a situation where we're not sure exactly who's at fault and we need to put as much blame as we can on the other side. Something that I forgot, in some circumstances, you can hire an accident reconstructionist that could download data in the vehicles. It may show the turn angle at the time of impact. It may show how fast someone was going. It may show various different things that will help you determine who's at fault for the accident. But these things cost money, so you also need to look at it from that angle if this case is a case that you want to spend that kind of money on. If they don't have insurance and there's not sustainable assets to go after that person, which most of the time there's not, that means that you have to see if you have uninsured motorist coverage on your insurance, at least in fault states, and then you could tap into that just like you're going after the other driver. You're just using your own policy to do it. It's uninsured motorist bodily injury, or if you have collision coverage or uninsured motorist property damage coverage, you know, that'll be for the property side if there's no insurance on the other side. All right, so let's say that you establish the other driver is at fault. Let's say that they do have valid insurance, or they have assets, or they're a company that you're going after where it doesn't matter, or you have protection against drivers with no insurance. You know, congratulations, you got the first couple check marks here that are the most important part of the case, or else you don't have one. You know, they're at fault and there's available insurance to pursue. You finish out your property damage like I was saying, you know, and you either get a new car or you get your car back after it's repaired. And now it's time to focus on your medical development. This is the longest part of the case. There's not a lot being done except you getting medical treatment for the injuries that you have from the car accident. It's very common that you go ambulance to the hospital, or ambulance to an urgent care, or you drive to the hospital or urgent care, or maybe you follow up with your primary care doctor. But after that, typically people will start off with a chiropractor. Look, you're going to go in and they're going to give you a full evaluation. And no matter whether your injuries are minor or major, they're probably going to say, let me see you a couple weeks, a couple times a week, and then we'll see how you're doing from there. In really serious injury types of cases, you may get an orthopedic surgeon or a pain management doctor involved right away. You may also get early MRIs ordered. You know, typically you wait a few weeks or a month before you go and get MRIs to see if you have any further injuries. It's important to understand an MRI is not a CT scan. I know you think you got an MRI at the hospital, but you didn't. You got a CT scan almost 99% of the time. And an MRI is going to show much more than a CT scan, or an X-ray is going to show. An MRI is going to show if you have any herniations, any tears, any ligament damage, any nerve damage, any sciatica, any types of tears, you know, and so forth. An MRI is going to be a massive part of your injury claim, because no matter how much pain you say that you have, and no matter how much medical treatment that you get, if the MRI shows that you don't have any injuries, it makes it kind of difficult to bring more value out of your case, because the insurance is going to say, look, I know they did all this treatment and I know they're saying they're hurt, but the MRI is very clear. They don't have anything going on there. And I saw the x-rays as well, and they don't have any fractures or broken bones going on there. But if you do have an MRI report that shows positive findings, you know, maybe a big herniation or small herniation, whatever, there's positive findings on the MRI. It's very common for someone to follow up with a pain management doctor or an orthopedic doctor to allow that doctor to review the MRI report and the disc that you have from the MRI, so that they can make their recommendation of what you should do next for your medical development. It's common for them to say, get more therapy. It's common for them to say, I'll write you another script that you already had. It's common for them to say, why don't we set up ESI injections or trigger point injections for your injuries. In very serious types of accident cases, you may have surgical recommendations made pretty early on, or somewhere in the middle, or in the end, whatever, you know, they're made because they're serious injuries. Also, your head, you know, if you have any type of head pain, maybe you're knocked out after the accident, or you've just been having ongoing pain and dizziness from your head since the accident, you could get set up with a traumatic brain injury doctor. Really, it's a neurologist, but they focus on TBIs for car accidents. And not only will this bring consistently more value to your case, because you're getting all the medical treatment that I just said, including this, but you're getting the treatment that you need for your injury. Don't mess around with the head. Head is a funny thing. You know, you break your bone, you see it right away. Your head, you know, you got NFL guys filing CTE lawsuits 20 years after they played. So don't mess around with your head. You know, if you got a good law firm, they're checking in with you. They're saying, how's medical treatment going? They're making sure that you're compliant with the medical treatment. There's a lot of people, they start their medical treatment and they fall off the face of the earth, or they miss 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks of treatment. And you're like, what are you doing? If you stop going to the doctor, you have something called a gap in your treatment, and you open up the door for the insurance company to say, hey, he didn't get treatment for 5 weeks, and then all of a sudden he went back and started complaining about injuries again. How do we know that he didn't get hurt again, or she didn't get hurt again during those 5 weeks that there was a gap building? So it's very important that you don't allow a gap in your treatment to build. Now look, I get it. Life happens sometimes. If you get sick, try to get some type of doctor's note, or try to get some type of receipt that shows that you've got over-the-counter meds, or something to say, yeah, there's a little bit of gap, but it's because I was sick, or there's a little bit of gap because I had to travel out of state, because I had, you know, a relative that passed away. We'll bring an obituary. Do whatever you can to show that there's reason for your gap. And if there is no reason for your gap, you know, your case is not dead in the water, depending on how big of the gap it is and how much injuries you had before the gap occurred. You know, there's ways to salvage it, but it's not good to have a gap in your treatment. Look, you know, some of these doctors out here have a lot of patients, and sometimes they drop the ball just like anyone else in the world. So if you feel like you've been going to the doctor for about a month and you still have pain, and they still haven't recommended that you get MRIs for your injuries, you should tell them that. You should say, look, I still have pain. I've been treating with you a month. My pain's not going away. Can I have a peace of mind and get some MRIs here so that I know what's going on? And the doctor may look at your chart and go, oh, gee, you know, we probably should have got him an MRI already. Like, you know, and then you can go to your MRI. It's going to help your case. It's going to give you peace of mind of what kind of injuries you got going on. These are things that you can do as well. All right, so you're done with all your medical treatment. You know, you've either made a full recovery or you didn't make a full recovery, and you have recommendations still after the case is over where you have future damages. You're going to need to get more medical treatment down the road. You know, maybe the driver you're going after doesn't have enough insurance limits, so the law firm you have, or you find out on your own, they don't have enough limits to pursue, which means now you have to stop your treatment early because there's not enough policy limits on either your insurance policy and the other driver's policy put together, or just the other driver's policy. It depends on which insurance policies you're going after. But, you know, say they have $30,000, which in Texas, it's a minimum limits. You could check out your state's minimum limits online. But you know, depends. Say they have $30,000 minimum limits, and you're now at $40,000 or $50,000 in medical bills. Well, that's not a good situation, because now you need to, you're way over their limits. You need to get a settlement as soon as possible, and then you're going to have to work out bill reductions, which I'll talk about in a second. But look, regardless, it's very, very good for your case to have recommendations for the future on the medical records, whether it's you or a lawyer negotiating your case. At the end, if they're talking to the adjuster and they say, yes, adjuster, here's his or hers medical development process, here's all of his injuries, here's all of her bills. But if you show that, well, here's a recommendation that has been made that they're going to have future injuries or they need future medical care. Now, when you're negotiating, you could talk about all these things that could happen in the future. Now, you can't just do a couple visits to the doctor and then say, I have all this future care, you should pay for it. No, future care is only considered if you do all the medical treatment that you possibly can for the case, and then future care has been recommended, and now you could talk to the insurance company kind of more confidently of saying, like, look, I did all this treatment and I still have these futures recommended. I also wanted to mention that if you have any scars or you have any bad bruises, God forbid you lost a child, I mean, of course, these kind of things are also a part of the injury claim and bring significant value to your case. They're typically found in the disfigurement category. If you're, you know, rock solid, rednecky kind of guy who works outside and you got a scar on your arm, like, you know, the insurance company may not care that much. But if you're a young girl who cares about the way she looks, her body, you know, and you go to the beach and you got this huge scar on your arm, like, the value of her case is much different than, you know, the guy that works outside. So all those things play a part in it as well, bring value to the case. It's very important to get photos of all your bodily injuries. All right, I think I covered everything there on the medical side. The next step is to request all of the records and bills. Now, in some circumstances, if the policy limits are, you know, you're getting close to reaching those policy limits, sometimes you don't have to show the insurance company every single record and bill, and you could just put together what's called a demand letter, which is basically a summary of your case. It goes all ins and outs of the case, how it affected your life, legally, what your case is worth, how the accident happened, what kind of medical treatment you got, what your injuries were. It may talk about the other person that caused it and some of the things that he did negligently. You know, those kind of things are going to be in a demand letter, and you could send that out. You could do a quick demand is what it's called, with only a few records and bills if you feel like you're already there at limits. And then, you know, you'd send out the demand letter and that's it. Or, you know, if you need to get all the records and bills in, then you put together a more extensive demand. It could be more of a full package type of demand. There's different kind of demands that you can do. It could be 1 page, it could be 10 page, it could be 1,000 pages. You know, it depends on who the insurance is, what the lawyer is going to do, you know, if he's going to file a lawsuit anyway, or if he's going to try to get a settlement on the table before that. You know, that's how the medical record requesting records, bills, liens, if you have a health insurance company that made a bill, or you have workers' compensation that maybe paid a bill, you got to get those liens in, is what they're called. And then, you know, you send over the demand to the insurance company to review. In that demand, you're demanding a certain amount of money that they pay, and the insurance company typically is going to take 10 to 14 days to review it, and then they'll respond back to your demand with their first offer. There is something called STOWERS, which by law, it means that if you have enough medical bills and records to have the insurance company give you the full policy limits, and they decide that they're not going to give you the full policy limits, you could then file a lawsuit and go after more than the policy limits. Now, that doesn't always happen, but in that type of situation as well, it's called the STOWERS demand, and you could demand that they respond to your demand within 48 hours. And if it's considered reasonable, you know, they will. There's a lot of different ways that demand process could go down. Again, why it's important that you have someone experienced on your side, which I'll talk about in a second here. But once the demand has been sent out and you've done your part there, negotiations begin. You're going to have the insurance adjuster reach out to you, give their first offer based on what your demand says. They're never going to meet your demand unless you like shoot way too low, but the insurance company's likely to come with a lower offer. They're never going to show their whole cards on their first offer. Some insurance companies are more reasonable than others. Some insurance companies like to settle cases. Some insurance companies don't really care. They will file lawsuits all day long. State Farm is like that. They're known and notorious for giving low offers because they know at the end of the day most people will take a low offer because they don't want to wait the whole duration of time of filing lawsuits and maybe one day going to trial. Just drags and drags, and State Farm tries to use that against the person that was in the accident. Maybe they got bills piling up. They've been just dragging and they need help with life. They don't want this thing to go on forever, and they take the low offer from State Farm. Other insurance companies are in the middle of the pack where some cases they'll give a generous offer. Some cases they won't give a generous offer. That'll be up to you or your law firm to make sure that you build a rock solid, strong case and hit them with it. And if they feel like they should give you a good offer, you could settle the case, great. If they don't, then you have to file a lawsuit. But at least if you file a lawsuit, you got a rock solid case. Things get tricky here with certain law firms. They may drop a client, which is just really unethical to take a case the whole way, get a low offer, and then drop them. I have signed up cases before where that's happened, and we've been able to rehabilitate them and make something work with them. It's a case-by-case basis, though, because, it's very difficult for a law firm to get a case way down the road and then try to make something of it. They do have the ability to step in. If you can get them involved early, switch lawyers early on in the case, it's a little bit easier to do. So negotiating, it could go down a lot of different ways. It depends on the insurance company, what kind of offer is going to be on the table. You got to be ready with your negotiation tactics. You should have kind of a sheet with all the main points of your case, how the accident happened, if the driver was a drunk driver, he's got a bad driving record, how excessive the accident was, how bad the damage was, if your car flipped, those kind of highlight points you're going to want to make. What were your injuries? What were your main injuries? If you had back pain, well, that's much different than saying you had a 5mm herniation. Get the details before you go to negotiating so that you could bring these things out in the negotiation phase. And you want to get that adjuster to reveal what his or her top offer is, because a lot of these adjusters can't even give you the real value of your case because they have limited authority. They have to go back to their supervisor and they can get additional authority. And then sometimes you talk to the supervisor and they have someone above them that has more authority. And at the end of the day, you just got to do everything you possibly can and show the insurance company why this is a risk for them not to give you a higher offer than what they're giving you now. If you get a good offer, great. You or the law firm, you can go back to all your medical providers and see how low they will take for their medical bills. For example, maybe you have a $30,000 settlement offer with $20,000 in medical bills, but that's $10,000 in profit. But then if you go back to those medical providers and say, hey, why don't you take $10,000 instead of $20,000? Now all of a sudden you have $20,000 in profit. In some cases, it's happened to me before. I've had a $500,000 hospital bill that I turned into $5,000 because the case warranted it. The hospital understood the situation, the policy limits available, and they reduced the medical bills. So, you want to see how low you can get your medical bills reduced to. That's where, again, an experienced expert in this industry will be really good at. So yeah, and then you settle the case. You put as much money as you possibly can in the client's pocket. You could reduce your fees if you want to, if you're a law firm that wants to do that to make things better for the client. If you've done a good job and everything's been reasonable and they're not in this unfortunate situation, you take the fee. That's what law firms do. At the end of the day, you're going to be in much better hands if you're with a good law firm than you ever would on your own, even with their fee coming out I'm telling you, if you go at this thing alone, you're going to look back and go, I should have just had a good law firm handle this. It would have been worth it to just pay them instead of trying to figure this out on your own. You know, not only do you probably not have the knowledge that you need to pursue a case, but if you're just a regular Joe or Jane, the insurance company's not threatened by you. They know that you're not going to file a lawsuit, and even if you do, they know that you're not going to be able to go toe-to-toe with their experienced insurance lawyer that works for them. But if you have a law firm on your side, they look at it and they go, oh, how good is that lawyer? You know, what's his success rate? What has he done in the courtroom lately? What is some of her highest settlements that she's gotten? Insurance companies look at these things, and that holds weight in negotiations as well. So once, you know, the settlement happens and you get all the bills reduced, you know, then that's it. The check gets cut to you and all the medical providers and the law firm, and then you resolve the matter and you go on with your life with as much money as you can from the case. And, you know, hopefully you never get into a car accident again. And if you were treated right by a good law firm or advocate, you're able to refer friends and family to that person. You're able to call or text them here and there with just kind of random questions that they may or may not be able to answer, but then that would be it. Now, if you can't settle the case, then that law firm has to file the lawsuit. You know, the first phase is settling. If you can't settle with the insurance, you have to file a lawsuit. That's where the insurance would then have their attorney step in and not their adjuster, and then it's the law firm versus the attorney of the insurance company. And once a lawsuit's filed, you go through what's called a litigation process. There's something called discovery, where both sides get to ask questions back and forth from each other, and the other side is supposed to be honest about all these things in a nutshell. And then after that, you know, you may be able to go to something called mediation, where a mediator gets involved with that tries to go back and forth between each side to find a happy median to resolve this matter so that you could stop the lawsuit and everything gets done. If you can't do that, you go all the way to trial. And that's where you have doctors come testify, you have to testify, they have a jury, they have a judge, you know, the whole 9 yards that you see on all the criminal TV shows out there. You know, that's the last possible thing. You know, maybe 5% of cases go all the way to trial. So if you're thinking like, just bring them to court and I'll go up on the stand and tell them how it is, it doesn't matter. You're never even going to get there. That's like 5% of cases that ever get that far, because it costs a lot of time, money, and effort to file lawsuits and go all the way to trial. So you or a law firm is going to have to make the decision of, is it worth it to spend all this time, money, and effort to go all the way to trial? You know, your case may not even be worth more than what it took to get it there. So that's all something. It's a numbers game at times that you have to consider. But yes, if you can't settle the case, you can file the lawsuit, maybe get it resolved then, or maybe you go all the way to trial. You know, some cases do. It is typical for a law firm to raise their rates from 33.3% to 40% with a lawsuit, or 45% with a trial. It just depends on your state, you know, and it's completely reasonable. If the lawyer is going to have to spend a lot more time, money, and effort, it's reasonable that their percentage would go up, because again, without them, you're dead in the water, you know, 99% of the time. So their services are adequate and are going to, you know, outweigh all the cons. You know, their services, being a pro, are going to outweigh all the cons. If you have a good law firm, you know, you got to do your research. You got to make sure that people have testimonials, make sure that the law firm didn't pay for some, you know, fake reviews on their Google. You know, it's good to know someone personally that has worked with someone before. And it's also important to understand that your case may be completely different than your friend's case. So don't just compare, well, my friend got this and so I should get this. Every case is different. Every injury is different. The way it's affected people, it's different. The insurance company involved is different. Oh my gosh, I'm sweating. My back is sweating. I've been walking around in this parking lot for probably 30 minutes now. I didn't get to eat my lunch because I was like, you know what? I should do an A to Z car accident breakdown. If you made it all the way through this video, please tell me, because wow, the only person that listens to me talk that long is my wife, or if I get to give the word at church. And I hope this video has been educational to you, entertaining to you, valuable to you. If you'd like a free case evaluation, you could call or text me anytime, 832-925-2030.